Hey again everyone, and hope you're all doing well. So welcome back to the channel for the next installment in our new figure showcase series. And if you're new here, this is where we take a quick look at a newer 6 scale figure I'm adding into the collection. Now, newer doesn't always mean recent release, but most of the time it is going to be something recent. So for today's installment, I have an interesting one for you. We'll be taking a look at the 6 scale version of Alice from the Resident Evil movie series by Premier Toys. So in case you were wondering, this is third party, so immediately I don't expect this to be of the same quality as Hot Toys releases or other comparable companies. So now this version is from Resident Evil Retribution, which had Alice in this very specific looking suit. Now full disclosure, I've watched all of the Mila Jovovich movies and they kind of all blur together, maybe with the exception of the first one in the series. So look, having said that, I didn't think these were the best movies ever. And if you're a huge fan of the video games, other than taking a few things from a game here and there and incorporating into the movies kind of went their own way. But they were still entertaining. They were still enjoyable. So for me, I thought this is a great figure to have, especially in a display with some action stars. The action in these was usually good, and I do have the older Alice from Hot Toys from one of the earlier movies that I kind of consider this to be a good companion piece for. So with that said, let's look at what Premier Toys is providing us with. So besides the figure, you do have a few additional accessories. You get a few hands, and then as far as weapons are concerned, you get a pistol, 2 submachine guns, and then you get some bladed weapons and a real metal chain. Now, you do also get this oversized base, which we've gotten in the past with, it looks like some of the larger Hot Toys figures, which is just interesting that they would choose to provide that with this specific figure. But as we get into it, I think there's a reason why they're doing that. So with that said, let's jump into the accessories, and we'll start with the usual for us, which are the hands. And look, I know that this is probably repetitive from all the videos, but you know, they're just hands with some slight variations, right? So here you're getting the fingerless glove look with that metal detail on the back of the hand. You do get them set in specific poses to hold the weaponry in place, but I will say that the paint apps, they're not the greatest. They're definitely a little bit lacking, and they come across a little bit toyish and dollish. So just take that for what it is. Next up, you get the 2 submachine guns, which are really well done. Now, these look like Chris Vectors. I'm not anywhere near an expert when it comes to weaponry, but there is a very distinctive look to these. Or these may just be something else doctored up for the movie. But I do think that those have been captured well here with some metallic looking paint apps on them. And just, there's a little bit of wear and tear on them. Just visually, they're very impressive looking, and they look unique. So it adds something extra. Next up, you do get a pistol. Paint apps are again very solid here with that nice silver on the body of the gun and the black grip plates on the handle. So while the paint app looks good, I do have to point out that there are no moving parts to this. So if you're used to other brands that do provide you with working moving slides and the like, then just be prepared to be a little disappointed here. Look, it's not something that's 100% necessary, and in this case, I would rather that they give me something that's just better looking as opposed to trying to get all these moving parts in. Next, you have some bladed weapons, including a machete-type blade and a pickaxe that seems more suitable for ice or climbing. Both are plastic, but the paint applications are solid. The pickaxe has a nice silver paint app on the blade and the bottom of the handle, where there's a little almost like diamond knife with a very intricate design, and it just looks great. The machete is a little more basic with a duller gray on the blade and a darkened wooden handle, so both are done very nicely, so no complaints there. And then you do get that metal chain, which is just that. It's a chain, right? That's the big plus here, that they used a real metal material. So it does give it a different feel overall. But again, it's not anything crazy or unique. So I think that's why Premier Toys was able to give us that material selection here. And it's just an added display option. Then we come to the base, which, like I mentioned before, is very interesting given how big it is. This is the kind of base we've seen with the likes of the original Hot Toys Falcon. So it's usually something I've seen with more dynamic figures and heavy figures. So kind of overkill, although I think it's needed for the figure, unfortunately. The top does have a diorama-like style that is essentially creating a tiled floor pattern with black and white tiles, and then appropriately enough to Resident Evil, you do have a ton of splashes of blood and what look like shell casings for guns. Okay, so let's get to the figure and start with the sculpt, which surprisingly, from an appearance look, is pretty decent. I mean, and I say that for third party, because that's oftentimes not the case. But the likeness is there, without a doubt. Now, as far as the paint apps, that's where this thing clearly suffers. It's definitely not on par with some of the bigger players in the market, and it's noticeable. But from a distance, not bad. Far from the worst I've seen, though. But even when you look at the eyes, they just lack the lifelike paint and look that we've gotten from other companies, and it's just much more toyish. Ultimately, the biggest eyesore to me is the hair. It lacks so much detail and just looks like a blob of plastic. And we've gotten used to great sculpted hair from other companies. And the biggest thing is that you can clearly see the joint line at the hairline. So look, maybe I seem a little bit too critical, but there are definitely some issues here. But I will give them credit in terms of likeness, because I think there's no denying who it's supposed to be, just not the best execution. So now let's get to the rest of the figure. And look, I'll start by telling you off the bat, this figure is going to need a body swap. It just is. The body that's been provided here is atrocious. So, but the way I do my reviews, I just show you what comes out of the box. So let's start by looking at the suit, and it's okay. The undersuit is just a bit of a stretchy black fabric, and in mine, the lower arms at the wrist joints look terrible because the suit is pulled back. I've seen some figures online with better tailoring, so this could just be mine, but it looks bad. The upper arms also have that fancy chain, which looks good and has some detailing on it, but the one on my figure's left arm is a little warped, so it just doesn't sit naturally, and that all projects down to a corset of sorts with straps for her arms that all have that same detailed silver element. The upper chest piece has the Umbrella Corporation logo, and there are some silver buckles that run down the front of the torso. There is a functional zipper on the back that is flanked on either side by those buckle details, so that looks very good. Not gonna lie, my other issue here though is that it does seem a tad bit oversized and almost baggy, to be honest. So now the pants. The pants are that same fabric material with what seems like some pleather paneling that does create an interesting geometric pattern, and everything ends in these massive knee-high boots that also include those same buckle details running up the front and the back face of the boot. So it looks good, but you'll notice no split cut at the ankle joint, so good luck posing this. So look, I'll tell you this, on the display stand with the weapons, it's not a bad looking figure. Ton of issues start creeping in once you take a closer look, but I'm feeling like on a shelf walking by, it's going to look okay. And there are some interesting aspects here too. For example, I didn't realize that because there are no instructions provided, but the Chris Vectors have built-in magnets that can snap onto magnets on Alice's upper back. Having said that, while it's a great concept, the execution is again terrible. There are issues with the polarity on the magnets for mine, and even when you get the guns to stay on, they tend to rotate around. Basically would have benefited from stronger magnets. So now let's get to my biggest issue with the figure, and like I said, it's the default body. It's horrendous. First of all, it feels like it's seamless at the elbow joints, but I didn't have a feel for the direction to articulate. And the joint feels very stiff and almost like it'll break at any moment. So not much in terms of elbow articulation. And when I did articulate, the joint tended to force the lower arm back down. So it doesn't hold the pose well, and no idea what the base body is that they use here, but it's just bad. The shoulders, those do have a palpable joint that you can feel. On mine, the peg for the left arm just kept popping out. So unless I held the joint in place while I positioned the arm to manipulate it, it just kept having issues. And I had the arm pop out of the socket so many times that I stopped trying with that arm. And the legs, similar to the elbows, don't seem to have a perceptible joint, and the pants and boots significantly limit posability. So that's partly why you won't see many full-on action poses here. The body just sucks. And even the wrist pegs, they're just very pink, unpainted plastic, and they feel delicate. So unfortunately, the hand swapping, while it doesn't require significant pressure, I feel like it just looks cheap and it's a break waiting to happen. So I know that's a lot of negatives, but I have to be honest with all of you. And look, while I said aesthetically from a distance it works, the reality of the situation as I continue on my collecting journey is these things are expensive and only continuing to get more expensive. And at the end of the day, if the quality isn't there, some companies aren't going to make the cut. And right now, while I appreciate Premier Toys tackling a movie like Resident Evil, and while standing in a museum pose the figure looks decent, overall quality issues are just such that I'm not a fan. And if this is what Premier Toys is offering in the long run, short of filling critical gaps in the collection, I think I'm in a market where there's just not much more expendable budget to go after these. So aesthetically it's passable, but there are clearly tons of issues that preclude me from saying that it's an amazing figure. So honestly, you do what you like, but unless you're a super fan or are willing to overlook these issues, this 6-scale market is just full of options right now that might be better. So again, just my thoughts, but let me know what you think on this one. And maybe you think I'm being too harsh, but let me know and we'll touch base on the next video.